Basements are supposed to be quiet. Dark, unfinished spaces where you store boxes and forget about them. But after what happened to me, I learned that sometimes basements aren't empty at all. This happened about 4 years ago, when I was living alone in a small rental house just outside town. It wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a narrow staircase that led down into an unfinished basement. The landlord used to joke that the basement was creepy but harmless, and I believed him. I barely went down there except to do laundry. Most nights were the same. I'd get home from work around 8 p.m., make something quick to eat, and watch TV until I fell asleep on the couch. That night was no different. I remember scrolling through my phone, half watching some random show, when I heard a noise that made me pause the TV. It sounded like a dull thump. Not loud, not dramatic, just off. At first I brushed it off. Old house, pipes, maybe something falling over in the basement. Still, I got this overwhelming feeling of dread that I couldn't explain. My stomach dropped for no real reason, and I remember laughing at myself, saying out loud, "Relax, you're imagining things." About 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was slower, more deliberate, like something heavy being shifted across concrete. I muted the TV and just sat there, listening. The house felt way too quiet. No traffic noise, no neighbors, just me and whatever was making that sound below my feet. I should have trusted my gut right then, but instead, I did what a lot of people do. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a raccoon got into the basement somehow. Maybe a box tipped over. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked toward the basement door. As soon as I opened it, the smell hit me. Not mold, not dampness. Something sour, almost like sweat. I stood at the top of the stairs, shining my light down. The beam barely reached the bottom. All I could see were the concrete floor and the outlines of shelves along the walls. That's when I noticed something that made my heart start pounding. The basement door was never locked, ever, but the latch on the inside was turned. I froze. I stood there for a solid 10 seconds, staring at it, trying to convince myself I'd somehow locked it earlier and forgot. But I knew I hadn't. I never locked that door. There was no reason to. I whispered, "Hello?" My voice sounded weak, even to me. No answer. I took 1 step down the stairs, then another. Every step creaked loudly, and with each one, my stomach dropped more and more. Halfway down, my flashlight caught something that hadn't been there before. Footprints. Dirty, wet footprints leading from the corner of the basement toward the stairs. I got this overwhelming feeling of dread so intense it made me dizzy. My brain was screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. I was completely frozen, staring at those footprints, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I heard breathing. It was slow and shallow, coming from behind the shelves. I didn't think. I turned and bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. I locked it, threw my weight against it, and stood there shaking, listening. That's when the handle started to turn. Slowly, carefully. Whoever was down there wasn't panicking. They weren't rushing. They were testing the door, like they knew exactly what they were doing. I backed away, grabbed my phone, and called the police with shaking hands. I remember whispering, even though I was alone upstairs, telling the dispatcher that someone was in my basement. While I was on the phone, I heard a loud bang from below, then another. The door rattled in its frame. By the time the police arrived, the basement was empty. No broken windows, no forced entry, just muddy footprints that stopped right at the bottom of the stairs. The officer told me it was probably a transient who found a way in and left when they heard me upstairs. That explanation didn't make me feel any better. I moved out 2 weeks later. To this day, I still don't know who that was or how long they'd been living under my house before I heard them. This happened when I was still living with my parents during college. Our house wasn't old or run down, which is probably why what happened messed with me so badly. It was a normal suburban home, clean, well lit, and the basement was finished. Carpeted floors, a couch, a TV, and a small storage room in the back. I spent a lot of time down there because it was quiet and felt separate from the rest of the house. One night, my parents were out of town, and I had the house to myself. I remember coming home late after hanging out with friends, around 1 a.m. I wasn't tired yet, so I went straight down to the basement to watch YouTube and unwind. Everything felt normal. I locked the doors, turned on the TV, and stretched out on the couch. About an hour in, I noticed something that gave me a weird feeling. I kept hearing a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was coming from the video I was watching. I paused it, and the tapping kept going. It wasn't rhythmic, just irregular, like someone lightly knocking on wood, then stopping, then doing it again. My stomach dropped. The sound was coming from behind me. I turned around and stared at the door to the storage room. That door was always closed. It had old boxes, tools, and random junk inside, and nobody ever went in there at night. I told myself it was probably the pipes cooling or the house settling. Still, I muted the TV and listened closely. The tapping stopped. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding and turned back to the screen. That's when I got this overwhelming feeling of dread. It felt like I was being watched. I slowly looked back at the storage room door, and my heart started pounding when I noticed something that made no sense. The door was cracked open, just slightly, maybe an inch or two. I froze. I knew for a fact the door had been closed earlier. I even remembered pushing it shut when I sat down. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling weak, and took a few cautious steps toward it. I said, "Hello?" No response. As I reached for the door handle, I noticed scratches along the frame, fresh ones, like fingernails dragged across the wood. My stomach dropped even harder. Before I could touch the handle, the door moved. It didn't swing open. It just shifted slightly, like someone on the other side had adjusted their weight. I froze completely. Then I heard breathing. It was quiet, controlled, like someone trying not to make noise, but close, way too close. I stumbled backward and nearly tripped over the coffee table. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. I yelled, "Who's in there?" But my voice cracked, and it didn't sound convincing at all. That's when the storage room door slowly opened. I saw part of a face in the darkness, one eye, just staring at me. I screamed and ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. I slammed the basement door shut, locked it, and ran through the house, checking every room with my phone shaking in my hand. I grabbed a kitchen knife and hid in my parents' bedroom while I called 911. The police arrived within minutes and searched the entire house. They found the storage room empty, but they did find something else. A sleeping bag shoved behind the boxes, empty food wrappers, a bottle filled with urine. Someone had been living down there for who knows how long, coming out when we were asleep or not home. There were no signs of forced entry. The officer said the guy probably slipped in through the basement window and stayed hidden. They never found him. For months afterward, I couldn't go into that basement without feeling sick. Even now, whenever I'm in a room with no windows, I get that same overwhelming feeling of dread. To this day, I still don't know how many nights I was down there alone, while someone else was watching me from the dark. This is the one that still messes with me the most, because unlike the others, it didn't happen all at once. It stretched out over weeks, and I didn't even realize I was in danger until it was almost too late. A few years ago, I rented the basement apartment of a house owned by an older couple. They lived upstairs, and I had my own entrance through the back. It was cheap, quiet, and close to work, so I didn't ask many questions. The basement was partially finished. Bedroom, bathroom, small living area, and a long, unfinished section that the landlord said was just storage. They told me not to worry about it. At first, everything was normal. I worked late shifts, so most nights I'd get home around midnight. I'd heat something up, scroll on my phone, and fall asleep with the TV on. The house above me was usually quiet, except for the occasional footsteps or creaking floorboards. About 2 weeks after moving in, I started noticing small things. Stuff would be slightly out of place, a chair angled differently, the bathroom light off when I was sure I'd left it on, my phone charger unplugged. Every time I told myself I was just tired. I work long hours, I forget things, that's normal. Still, I got this overwhelming feeling of dread that I couldn't shake. One night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed muddy footprints on the concrete floor near the unfinished section. My stomach dropped immediately. I stared at them for a long time, trying to convince myself they were old. They weren't. They were fresh, still slightly wet. I wiped them up and didn't say anything to my landlords. I didn't want to seem paranoid. But that night, I slept with my bedroom door locked for the first time. A few nights later, I woke up to a sound. Breathing. Not loud, not gasping. Just slow, controlled breathing that wasn't mine. I froze. The room was dark, but I could tell the sound wasn't coming from inside my bedroom. It was coming from the other side of the wall, near the unfinished area. I lay there, holding my breath, listening. After about a minute, the breathing stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I asked my landlords if anyone ever went into the unfinished section. They exchanged a quick look before the husband said no. Just pipes and storage, nothing else. That should have been my sign to leave. Instead, I stayed. A week later, I came home early from work feeling sick. As soon as I walked in, I knew something was wrong. The air felt different, heavy, stale. My stomach dropped when I noticed my bedroom door was open. I knew I'd closed it. I walked in slowly and noticed something that made my heart start pounding. My closet door was cracked open, and my clothes looked disturbed, like someone had moved them around. I backed out of the room and went straight to the unfinished section, heart racing. I shined my flashlight around, expecting nothing. What I found made me freeze. A mattress, thin, dirty, shoved behind the insulation, along with food wrappers, water bottles, and cigarette butts. Someone had been living there, quietly, watching. I felt sick. As I stood there trying to process it, I heard movement behind me, a slow shuffle, then breathing. Very close. I didn't turn around. I ran. I sprinted out of the basement, up the back steps, and into the yard. I called the police while my hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. When they searched the basement, they found more. My clothes folded neatly on the mattress, photos of me, taken while I slept, notes scribbled on scraps of paper with my work schedule written down. The man was gone. The police said he'd likely been entering through a crawl space connected to the unfinished area. They never found him. No fingerprints, no name, nothing. I moved out that same night. To this day, I still don't know how long he'd been living there, or how many nights he stood in my room while I slept.